Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I've called the meeting to order of the regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission on September 20th, 2022 at 6:02 p.m. Will the secretary please call roll?
Do we have Chair Jeannie Reddy,
Here.
Vice Chair Lance Shaw,
Here.
Commissioner Jared Peterson,
Here.
Commissioner Lori Riley,
Here.
and Commissioner Chuck Romberger.
Here.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, the next item on the agenda is petitions from the public. Do we have any petitions from the public?
We do.
Are those related to the agenda or are they off the agenda?
I believe they are related to the agenda, yes. So if you would like to keep that in line with the topic at hand, we can approach the two petitions at that time.
Yeah, I definitely want to give everybody a chance to speak. If it's related to the agenda, I'd rather we proceed and have folks speak a little bit later. Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Okay. I'll move on to item number 3, and we'll address the petitions from the public later in the meeting. Item number 3 is approval of the regular meeting minutes of August 16th. I just had one very minor correction. At the very top paragraph, it's just a minor typo in the roll call. It lists my name twice and left off, it should be Commissioner Romberger as the last name in that top paragraph.
I apologize for that and I'll get that fixed.
Other than that, they look good to me. Anybody else got any feedback on the meeting minutes? If not, if I can have a motion, that would be good.
I make a motion to accept the minutes for August 16th, 2022. What, was that right? Did I say the right date?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes from the August 16th, 2022 meeting. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Say nay. And did anybody abstain this time? No, we've got all ayes then. All right, we'll move on to the business at hand. Item number 4. This is a preliminary site plan approval for property at 121 3rd Street, seeking to remodel their garage. And what I'd like to, I know we have a lot of people here that do want to speak, and I know the applicant is anxious to get this process moving along. What I'd like to do to kind of maintain the structure of the meeting is you know, as I said, this is a preliminary review. This construction projects will have to go through additional processes after tonight. So just keep that in mind, that we're not in a position to give a final review based on where we're at. I'd like to, you know, let the admin give us a summary, let the board kind of ask questions and discuss the matter. And then if the applicant wants to make a statement, and then we can move on to statements from other people. If you do want to speak when we open it up, if you will please just raise your hand, or I think there's a button you can push to raise your hand so we know who to acknowledge. And then once you're acknowledged, then you can go ahead and make your statement. So if we can go ahead.
I have
Yes.
a question. So the petitions from the public, you're gonna have them wait until the applicant speaks? Or do you want them to speak first?
Because they're related to the agenda item, if they were separate issues, then maybe we would handle that in a different order.
Maybe if we have the applicant speak and then the petitions from the public give their 3 minutes. And then we can move on. And then if they have questions after,
So you
Then-
prefer to hear everybody speak before the board discusses the?
yes, because
Yes.
that's really how they speak
Okay.
in the beginning. So
Okay.
we'll have the applicant speak, they can do their petition so it makes sense of what they're, what it's related to. And then we can go on to our, discussions, and then people
I'm
can have,
certainly flexible, as long as
then
we
people
have.
can have like, questions after we just start discussing, like it'll be mixed in as opposed to, because they have that 3 minute to speak, petitions from the public, so get that going.
Okay. I think it would be good for us to get the summary from the administrator and then go from there.
Mhm.
I'm flexible
And-
to whatever the commission would like.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm flexible for whatever the commission would like. If they'd like me to give a summary first, I'm happy to do it.
So like the applicant, the summary, and then the petitions from the public. I think that would work. And then we can go from there. any-
If I can say, I'd like to give a summary of it and then let gaps be filled in by the applicant. And then specific questions that are brought up by the commission can also be addressed by the applicant. In terms of planning and zoning issues, I can jump in and answer those specifics. But if it's project related specific questions, those should totally be directed to the applicant. But I'm happy to give a summary, and that might help inform your questions.
I really think we should have the summary first, and then if the applicant would like to speak, and we can move from there.
Okay, well, usually the petitions from the public speak in the beginning, so that's why I was, I don't know. Yeah. So whatever works.
I think I'd like to do the summary first. And go then the applicant and then the petitions.
Well, then I'm going to go ahead and launch into it, folks, if there's no objections. So
Please do.
there are, of course, a number of questions and concerns about this, as raised by many people. And I'd like to start off by first acknowledging that I did make one mistake in here. It's not something that should derail this process, but instead something that we can fix while we're in the process. Part of the preliminary review, to my mind, is so that we can make these changes. We can adapt to conditions, or at least the applicant can adapt to any conditions, any changes that are necessary. And they have the room to do so and the time to also do so while still bringing it back for a final review. So that said, I made a mistake with my calculations off the of the height from the median grade. We were looking at median grade as it relates to the parcel. However, it does require that it's calculated from the building footprint. And that is it was an oversight on my end, but that can easily be rectified. What we could do is, if we proceed to approve the preliminary tonight, one of those conditions of approval would simply be to recalculate based on the requirements of the zoning ordinance. And then those recalculations or any modifications that are required as such can come back for the final site plan. But I do own that mistake, and I want to thank Greg Worth for pointing this out. Secondly, so this garage, in short, because I'm sure everyone has read this, at least I'm hoping so. In short, we have an existing garage, and the applicant is seeking approval to demolish the wood structure that is existing there, and then rebuild a garage on the existing footprints. Now, the footprint is considered an existing non-conforming footprint in terms of the setbacks. And this is because a garage existed there. A structure, I should say, existed there prior to the even the 1980 garage, which is there now. The garage that currently is there is not a building that we're considering in terms of its historic nature. And frankly, that is irrelevant for this case because it's where the building sits, the foundation, the retaining wall that are important for this process. And the existing garage I was made aware of today is not, it was built probably around 1980, but it was rebuilt after a garage that was there prior had burned down previously. So there is an existing footprint there. And this is something that, by the way, I will try to verify with the applicant on the ground when we have an opportunity to actually look at the at this foundation and that wall and double check and make sure there is a historic foundation there. And so that is something that has added to the complexities of this issue. Part of that segues into the fact that we don't have a good set of standards in our zoning ordinance currently that covers remodel thresholds, things of that nature. There's a lot of different standards set by a lot of different municipalities, counties, agencies, but we don't have a set standard in our ZO. And what I mean by that standard is, a percentage or an amount of an existing structure that has to be retained in order for another building to count it as a remodel. Now, that said, some of these thresholds can be as high as 50% of a structure, but a lot of thresholds are as low as retaining one wall or 10% or even less of the structure. So what we're looking at in terms of when we're thinking about nonconformity and footprints, we're thinking about this historic concrete foundation that existed there long before the existing garage is there. Now, one thing that we definitely need to double check before the final review is, did the garage rebuild in 1980, forgive me, there's a fly, did the garage rebuild in 1980 go outside of that historic footprint? It's always possible. That's just something that we ground truth on the ground, and I report back to you at some point later in the process here. Now, the remodel is, as the plans have it, is sort of hinging on this fact, using the existing footprint to create the proposed garage over top this non-conforming footprint. So in terms of conformity or non-conformity, that is really what our consideration is for this step in the process. That is, again, something that I'm working with and digging into the archives to verify, and then with the applicant's approvals, I'll try to reach out, and then I can look at it my own self and make a determination. Some of the terminology used has also been problematic for certain people, and so let me address that as well. The terms reapproval and such are not binding words here. Instead, it's meant to convey that this project, or a very similar project, has previously been through this process, dealing with a lot of the same issues, and is still, and there are parts of this that are still relevant for our review, that we need to at least consider to make a properly informed decision. So that terminology is there simply to remind people that this project, or its estranged brother, has previously been through some of the review process. Previous versions of the packet contained some of those minutes, and those packets extended out to almost 90 pages and was seeming to almost confuse the matter more than it was enlightened. So the current packet that you have in front of you has a lot of the previous applications, previous minutes removed from this version in order to keep it tight and easily readable. So on to the actual project itself. Now, as stated previously, this is all preliminary review. This is conceptual review. This is not going to end with the issuance of a building permit, not if it's voted for approval today. There's still a few more steps that need to be undergone before we get to that point. Part of this makes sense to be for the sake of the applicant. The style of building, the way that the building contractor releases some of its information. It makes more sense for the applicant to receive a preliminary conceptual approval before she spends the money to receive the end product from the contractor. Now, what we have is the building that's proposed to replace the existing garage is colloquially called a pole barn. That's not a great use of that term, if you ask me, because that does imply something that's somewhat rural or agricultural in its nature. And these are far more common than people realize. These are essentially a post construction that has siding. And these posts are sunk sometimes up to 6 feet or more, depending on the specifics of the project, into a foundation. And then the siding is attached to those posts. That's all it means by pole barn style of construction. It's a term used for the style of construction. When we're talking about the height, this is an issue that definitely I need to look at and recalculate. We need to make sure that the measurements to calculate the height are taken from the correct place on the footprint of the building rather than the entirety of the parcel, top and bottom of the parcel. That would create a median that could be well above, you know, the lowest point of the property, and the offset can be quite enormous. So that is something that needs to be double checked, because also it may not be that major. It may not be that different than what we have in front of us. So that is something I want to recalculate and definitely bring back for the final review. Other things about this that have been concerns that have been raised are the potential for a residential occupation. Let me just state right now that the Town of Jerome zoning ordinance does not allow any residential occupation in any detached accessory building. So that's not a concern in terms of this. I've heard nothing from the applicant that would make me believe that this was intended as use for a residential occupancy. And the preliminary build out doesn't show any of the requirements that could be defined as a dwelling unit. You know, should hypothetically the applicant decide to make it an Airbnb, that is something that the town could address at that time, because that would be in violation of the zoning ordinance. However, that is not a consideration here to my mind. That's doesn't seem very problematic to me here. One positive side of this that at least everyone can agree on is that if the project is approved and goes forward, there is a town sewer line that runs underneath that foundation where the garage currently exists. And having that sewer line exposed after the demolition of the garage would allow our public works department to go in and replace some aging and even potentially damaged sections of that sewer line, as well as maybe modernizing and upgrading as is possible. So that is one net positive, because I know that there's been a number of issues with the sewer there over the years. So this would be one area that we can get at and mitigate an issue. Now, as we look on, the elevations and the site plans here were provided by the applicant, and these are conceptual. Certain parts of these may change, or we may have a lot more information as the building contractor provides it. Once the applicant is able to provide the, forgive me, this fly is really driving me nuts. Once the applicant is able to purchase the building, feels safe enough to purchase the building and gets engineering details from the building contractor, that information will replace the preliminary graphics that we currently have with more detailed information. Now, I am again looking more into the historical side of this to verify that there is an existing footprint that would allow for continued nonconformity. So we do have one historical photograph in the packet, but I am also seeking additional ones for the next review should this pass preliminary tonight. So I intend to have more detailed information on that in the future. When we look at the project site itself, all the surrounding land uses are the same. It is the R15 single family residential, and there's no conflicting land uses on any of the surrounding properties. Now we have a series of pages that have hopefully what you would agree is a good photographic outline of the project site and the surrounding area. These photos are recent, they're only a few weeks old, and I took them myself. Now, this is again has been a brief overview and summary where my emphasis has been addressing concerns I've heard from the general public, and hopefully I've been able to assuage some of those concerns. There's a lot to this that I might have glossed over briefly, but I'd like to give an opportunity for specific questions I may not have addressed to be directed to me. If it is something that is maybe project specific, less planning and zoning, that is something that we should totally address to the applicant. Did I gloss over anything that anyone would like me to expand on?
I thank you, Will, for that summary. I'd like to I think that one of the major questions about this project was, is it a new construction versus is it a reno? And I understand the footprint argument that if you're not expanding the footprint, that you're still within the non-conforming usage. But then how does expanding the height affect that equation? And I'm still kind of
I understand.
looking for more guidance on the issue of whether this is new construction that needs to meet certain setback requirements, or whether it's a renovation that remains as a legal non-conforming use. So, and I was hoping that I would get more guidance from the zoning ordinance on that, but it just is not clear. I'm still looking for, something to convince me one way or the other on this one, honestly.
So let me talk about that for another minute here. So this is definitely something that I've had to dig into the weeds on, because our zoning ordinance doesn't talk about renovations or remodels very much. It actually doesn't talk about them at all. It doesn't even define them. And so there are sections of the zoning ordinance which simply say that a non-conforming structure can't be increased in any way that would increase its discrepancy. I'm sorry, enlarged in any way that would increase its discrepancy. Or non-conforming structures that have been damaged due to, yada, 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 cannot be rebuilt. Now, those things do seem like a very hard line. However, when it comes to renos and renovations, we have to remember that those things are permitted. We are a historic landmark. As such, we fall under the historic preservation laws, and Secretary of the Interior standards do recognize these types of projects as existing in the world, and do even promote them. Now, the question is, because we at the local level don't have specific guidance in our zoning ordinance, what we have is essentially we need to verify that we do have a historic foundation. If we do have a historic foundation and the applicant is trying to build a structure on top of that existing historic foundation, while incorporating that foundation and that concrete retaining wall that are historic, that could satisfy that. However, we don't have a one wall 10% or even 50% threshold. Now, what we do have is previously, and this is where the previous process comes into play. So a preliminary approval was made at the council level in 2018. That approval has expired, and this is a new thing. However, the council, when they voted to approve that, they chose to accept that project as a remodel, as a renovation, using that same sort of standard of threshold. And so here we are with the same standard of threshold. And I wanted to carry on the policies that were set in place by the council at that time, especially as I had no specific set of standards or very clear direction in our zoning board. I know that probably even confuses the issue more, and I apologize for that, but did that go any way towards answering your question?
Well, I think so. I mean, I think I understand that to the extent there's a historic foundation, in order to preserve that, you have to build on that same footprint.
That's correct.
I get that part. And I also, since I don't have anything clear in the ordinance to guide me, my next thought is how has the town historically treated this situation? You know, and if there have been similar situations in the past 10 or 20 years, you know, I would look to maybe more experienced members of the board who might know some more information on that. I don't know if
Well, I have to say too, the zone from when it was historic back in the day was light industrial, and I was reading, I believe it's 501 C12, saying that it goes to the existing zoning, and it's a non-conforming accessory, and enlargement would I include the height, because an enlargement to me is height. And another thing that I believe that measuring the height would be on Center Street. There's no, you're going within that building, and there's no discrepancy. It needs to be only 14 feet high. That's how I read it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and that height is, again, we need to be recalculated based on using the accurate metrics as laid out in the zoning ordinance. And so that is information which will be given to you once we put together a packet for the final review. And I will work with the applicant to ensure that her designs incorporate these elements.
And also, yeah, because even in the application, it says demolition, demolish. And to me, that's pretty clear. When you do that, you have to go to conform to setbacks and all that. So there's,
Well, demolition can be a part of multiple processes. It's only a part of a process. It's not the entirety of the process itself.
yeah, well, just reading what's in here is when you do the demolition,
Mhm.
then you have to go to setbacks, and you have to, it's not a conforming anymore.
Well, the thing is, the building won't be counted as being, this is
But
where, again, it's a gray area that,
On it says, say, demolish. Yeah,
well,
so,
the structure itself will go away technically with a demolition permit. However, it won't be considered as demolished, as gone. It will be undergoing a remodel or renovation if the historic footprint is verified.
all right, and I don't know, but was something else I was gonna say. So that one wall, but that's kind of, I don't know.
If I can interject real quick, and I really apologize, Jarrett. Just so everyone knows, we've been having some serious issues with our Zoom accounts here. So it's, even though we have licensed versions, it's treating us as we are a free trial version. And so it just popped up a timer that the meeting will end in 2 minutes and 40 seconds. The moment it ends, please rejoin, and I apologize for this. This is one of the many issues that we can't log in and change at the moment and are working to fix. And again, I'm really sorry for this.
I have a question too, as Jarrett, on your concern about the demolition, whatever, does this go back to the fact that it has a historic foundation, and so that's what saves the setbacks because of the fact that that's historic?
Yes.
Okay,
that's how I understood it.
okay.
Yeah, but the height to me, like the 14 feet, that seems pretty clear as far as from Center Street, not part of the house.
The
Yeah.
height is not in question. It was the
Oh.
metrics used to calculate the height based off of the slope. And that was an error in using the wrong metrics on my end. We will get that fixed, but the 14-foot height is the maximum allowable height. The applicant is aware of this and has been attempting to conform the building. with
Okay.
that. So we will work
Yeah,
with the
it-
applicant to make sure she achieves that.
Within the footprint, it has to go and be exactly in the form.
Yes, it has to follow
Yeah.
the existing footprint
Yeah.
that was established, yes.
And I would, yeah, the height, because it's like originally, the garage was in light industrial and now it's in residential. So
Well,
there's
that-
yeah, now it has to conform to the residential zoning, not light industrial.
Well, yeah, I understand that. However, as a detached accessory building, there's no part of this that has industrial considerations attached to it. That would be considerations for use. And again, we have a lot of different types of uses throughout our town that have been kept and even adaptively reused and yet kept their historic non-conforming footprints despite undergoing a series of adaptive reuses.
Yeah, and also the state with the expiration of what was before, I'm in belief, and I've said many times that once it expires, it starts all over again. That's how
And
I
that's,
see
that's why we're here. This is the process
That's
starting
it.
over again. Yes, ma'am.
it. So, okay,
Now, the meeting will probably crash here. There we are.
right.
Okay, so forgive me again. So we were talking about who was up on deck talking?
I believe, Jared, did you have any more?
No, I was just mentioning about expiration and then it starts over. So, yeah, I think we got that done.
Okay,
I believe we have a question.
Kelly,
Hi, Will, can you please confirm that within the ordinance that non-conforming, that height does not actually increase the non-conforming? Can you confirm that to the member, please?
Yeah, this was a legal opinion given to me by our town attorney that in terms of setbacks for planning, in terms of setbacks, increasing the height of a non-conforming building doesn't actually increase that discrepancy of non-conformity. What it's specifically referring to there in terms of planning and zoning are the two-dimensional setbacks.
Thank you.
Mhm.
You have a question?
One more.
May I ask a question? Do I need to be?
yes,
represented?
please. Yes,
Thank you.
please.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lita. Thanks very much, William, for the helpful summary. I did want to ask a clarification question on if you could give me the site to the Jerome ordinance that provides the basis of moving past the existing footprint that is physically there now. I didn't quite follow why we would go beyond the
Oh.
existing.
Okay, that was not, this has nothing to do with your current project whatsoever, but has the potential that the garage rebuilt after the older one burned. There's always a potential that may have overlapped outside of the existing footprint, even a few inches or a foot or two. But just for the sake of being 100% accurate in all this, that's something that I am eager to verify because that will settle a lot of these issues one way or another.
And that will be through the town's records?
Oh, part of it is through the town's historical society. Use of their photographic records, some of their historic maps, and then in conjunction with Kelly, I'm hopeful that maybe I can look at the foundation myself. Professionally, I've been an archaeologist, and SHPO recognizes me as the town archaeologist. And so I feel comfortable taking a look at this myself and trying to make that determination, especially with the help provided by the Historical Society.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I need to address, so section 51, non-conforming situations and the purpose. It states that prohibiting their being moved, altered, enlarged, or restored after destruction in the manner which would increase the discrepancy between conditions existing at the time of adoption of the ordinance. So enlarged to me would include height.
So, however, I have a legal opinion from the town attorney that states that an increase in height does not increase that discrepancy, that is referring to a two-dimensional footprint for planning and zoning purposes. And that is the legal opinion of our town attorney. So that's,
Okay,
Oh,
well,
yeah.
I disagree because what I'm reading is not stating that to me.
okay.
So that, yeah,
It does state that if the height, it's a problem if the height increases the discrepancy.
and discrepancy would be increased if you're increasing the height. It says enlarged, altered, enlarged was part of it.
I mean, I see that as discussing the setback issue, which I don't think the height is affecting the setbacks. The height might be affecting other things, but
Well, the way I read it is what I'm saying, non-conforming, it says that intended to limit the number, blah, blah, by the structures, prohibiting being moved, altered,
Mhm.
enlarged, restored after destruction in a manner which would increase the discrepancy between conditions existing at the time of adoption. So my interpretation, as I'm reading it, when you're going high, you're enlarging the structure. You're altering and you're enlarging. You're altering and enlarging. So
Well,
that's how I read it. They think that it does change the discrepancy. There's nothing maybe the attorney says, but there's nothing stating what he says. That is an interpretation, and how I read it as a zoning administrator is that it does change it.
And well, as the town zoning administrator, one of my responsibilities is to follow the legal advice given to me by our town attorney. And in this case, lacking clear-cut guidance from the zoning ordinance, that's what I had to do. And I've had a lot of various opinions on this, but the only one that matters to me for this purpose is the legal opinion of our town attorney, unfortunately.
Well, that's your opinion, but as an administrator, I'm reading and interpreting, and that's what I read out of this. And there's nothing stating what he said about footprint, because they're very clear and concise and very detailed with what they're putting in the zoning, and they would have put footprint, but it says enlargement and enlarging and, increasing discrepancy. Well, enlarging, if you go higher, you're enlarging building. That seems clear.
I
means-
understand. The
Yeah.
ordinance, to my mind and understanding, is when it refers to enlargement, is really referring to expanding outside of its historic or traditional footprint, enlarging the building, enlarging the footprint. This is really what we're talking about, especially when you boil it down and think that this is trying to refer to site plan review, and site plan review is really looking at placement on the lot. So if you think about it as a map in two dimensions, when it talks about enlarge, it really is talking about enlarging the existing footprint.
Like I said, I'm not going to argue with you. I'm just as how I'm
That's fair.
interpreting what I'm reading, which is in the zone. So in the ordinance. So that's all.
I
Yeah.
appreciate your input. Thank you.
fair enough. I have one more question about the historical nature of the foundation, and that you still need to do some more investigation on that. If it turns out to be other than what we think it is, I mean, how does that change?
Well, if we determine, beg your pardon, if it is determined that the historic footprint, for whatever reason, and we're in the realm of hypothetical here, let's say it doesn't exist after all. And so we have a couple of options here. The applicant has the ability to make changes and consider that, and provide the setbacks as required for a new construction. That is always possible. she has the option of withdrawing the project entirely, or even attempting to appeal it at a higher level. And that's all fine. That's up to the applicant. But if, to my mind, if the historic footprint just isn't there, and then a simple redesign of the project would suffice.
Can I ask a question? I haven't looked to see, so what would be considered historical? So what's the date line of that?
So typical standards, there's a cutoff date that we use professionally of about 50 years. Sometimes you'll find people specifically set a date at 1955 rather than have a constantly rolling 50 years. But SOI standards, the federal standards that we live under here in Jerome, are 50 years. So even a historic garage that was built, say, in 1970, 10 years prior to 1980, would technically count. However, we do know that there were existing buildings there long before that, that back to the turn of the century. Now, obviously, other buildings have come and gone since then. And this is part of where the fun of living in Jerome comes in, as we try to trace back the forensics of what building existed where and when. And that is something that I want to try to provide to the commission with more accurate information.
And so this kind of went up into my head of going historic, because there were houses all over. And if we allow for everything in the historic to be non-conforming, we'd have houses everywhere, right? So that that just went through my mind, like they weren't always there in a way that was actually safe. So
our town, whether we like it or not, was designed with these small setbacks, and we, choosing to live here, this is something that we have to occasionally deal with. Now, in instances where we have obviously a new construction, a larger house, I mean, let's say we had a new house going in and they were adding multiple bedrooms. It was a big, full, modern house. Obviously, that would not fulfill the requirements of historic setbacks if they're expanding and modifying. The historic homes that were here, even with those small setbacks, were typically very small homes. So oftentimes, we can find a way to mitigate some of the concerns and work with the applicants. There are always going to be situations here where we can't do it. But again, this is an interesting situation for a wide variety of reasons.
So to go the historic footprint, basically part of that building has to exist still. Is that what you're saying?
It also, you have to be careful on what you define as the building, because that historic concrete foundation and that wall that are on the back are what we're talking about in terms of preservation. And then fitting the footprint, we're talking about the historic concrete footprint that is underneath the existing garage that's there now.
And that's not any new concrete that's been poured over it?
Not to my knowledge, but maybe the applicant can enlighten us.
I think Ms. Foy has her hand up. If she'd like to speak, please.
Thank you. I would like to. I'm not sure if we're in the discussion yet, or if we're getting to the presentation yet. So I'll just add a little bit. Footprint, to my understanding, is the existing layout of the building. We've not implied that we're keeping the concrete footprint of the building. We've implied that we're keeping the footprint and the existing historic wall. And that's in my application. It says that the demolition permit is for partial demolition to start a new footing and leave the existing historic wall. And that's what makes it the remodel. So I just want to clarify that so that we don't get too far along on that. And yes, there is definitely a wall that is the original wall from the original building. But there's no existing concrete that we could verify matches that building, just the footprint of the garage.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I think I've been going down into the weeds on this for too long, so I'm definitely getting my eyes crossed. Now, again, that historic foundation, what we're worried about there is the historic footprint. The concrete wall that is intended to be incorporated, this is where we have no threshold established for those historic remodels. Now, many places do have a one wall policy. One existing historic wall is retained into a new structure. then it counts as a remodel or a renovation. So that's where, carrying on the council's previous decision, we chose to treat this as a renovation at this point.
Okay. At this point, are there any more questions from the commission members at this time? If not, the applicant can make any statement or presentation that she'd like to make. I don't see any. Ms. Foy, would you like to say anything else on this application?
Sure. I'd like to talk about it a little bit, and then I'd also like to ask permission to respond to any questions from the public as well. And just to say that out up front, to ask permission to do that, just so that we can address those and that I have permission to speak later, because I don't want to go into
Sure.
too much, but I'm happy to answer questions and give details about it throughout. So, and then ask my own of them as well. But I assume that you guys have the drawings for the application. And I would ask that you look at the application and see that all of the median grade and the whole plan is based on the street address, which is 3rd Street. I live on 3rd Street. That median grade has been determined off of 3rd Street as well. It's a garage, and we've been working on this for years, and it's been approved. And I was hopeful that with the new materials that are more fire safe and more historically accurate, I would think that we would get some questions, but that it would be a pretty straightforward approach to this pack. I appreciate you looking at this, and I know that a lot of things are it's always new. I served on the commission for years as well, so I know there's always a new angle to look at this, but I think that what we really need to look at is just we've applied for this based on the existing ordinance and done our best to really go over it and adjust it and make it as, how do you say, compatible as, historically compatible, which is what SHPO prefers, and also something that is useful to us, but also makes sense on this property. So if there's any other questions, I don't know what more to say, as long as you have the image that was drawn. There is an architectural drawing of the space to give you a sense of the property from 3rd Street and the scale of it. I guess the only thing I would say is that we adjusted our height based on the new ordinance changes. Even since we were approved, we recognized that they had adjusted the height, and so we adjusted that median height based on that as well, and we just like that to be considered. But I'll take questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well. So thank you.
I think that just one comment on the median grade, because the ordinance does state that you're going to calculate that based on the grade under the structure. So I think that does need to be recalculated based on a different parameters, I think.
So this is the first time I'm hearing this new interpretation of the median grade. There's drawings, and we've always interpreted all cases based on those specific drawings that are based on the grade of your home from the front, which includes the land below it and above it. And the height is the reason that everyone has made this the diagram of the town ordinance. I guess I'm not clear, and this is the first time. We've been doing this for years, and this packet has been on the agenda for many, many weeks, but I've never heard anyone talking about recalculating it. And I understand that the only reference I heard was that Will said that the neighbor said that there's a new calculation, but I'd like some clarification where that is in the ordinance, and because I don't understand, like, how do you do it from the ground of my house? Like,
I will be happy. I'll be happy to send that stuff your way. This was something, again, concerns brought by a number of people to me, and that it was determined, okay, I maybe was using the wrong metrics here today. It's a very subtle thing. It's
I can tell you
unfortunately
right
easy to
where
miss.
it's.
So we can
Thank you.
confirm that my house is on Third Street and the grade is the median grade is based on Third Street, right? That's all I need to know.
So the median grade is calculated, your high and low points for calculating your median grade need to be within the footprint of the building. You
Yeah.
can't take the entirety of the parcel into consideration. And so,
Yeah.
we will adjust these things to match as the ordinance requires. And I believe I was mistaken on my part in calculating it incorrectly off the entire parcel. So that is my mistake.
Can I just say one thing, and I'll just leave it to this. I have been through this process and also been on these boards. So I just wanted to know, because there's so much misunderstanding within the boards, that is also why I brought in a land use attorney who understands these ordinances and across the board. And so I will be seeking her feedback throughout this process as well.
And
Thank you.
just
Okay.
to
I-
answer your
I-
question, Ms. Foy, if you look at the Article 2 definitions under section 201, accessory building height of, that's where it specifies the grade beneath the enclosed portion of the structure. So that's where it gives that parameter of how to calculate that. I just
And
wanted to give you
Also,
that.
yeah, also under section zoning, what's an accessory building? It says detached accessory building, which it's detached, shall be constructed to the height not greater than 14 feet to the peak of the highest point of the roof. Define an accessory building height of. So it's an accessory building, it's not attached to the building, so that's also, I think, that's would be considered of where. Does that make sense? It's not attached, so.
Yeah, I mean, the applicant has always been striving to achieve that 14-foot maximum within the zoning ordinance. However, it was the calculations that I was making on that height that may have been incorrect. So this is something to verify with the applicant, and something that can easily be corrected and fixed. This one shouldn't be a project killer.
Yeah, well, it's restated through accessory buildings that it's the peak of that building, so 14 feet to the peak of that building. So
Yes, ma'am.
it's stated in a different way through accessory non-attached building. Yeah. All right.
Okay. I'd like to, does anybody have any further questions or want to make any comments?
I should probably make one more comment before I leave it. And forgive me, I'm trying to remember everything. Now, I know there's been concerns raised by Chief Blair from our fire department. And I've spoken to Chief Blair about this even just the previous week. Now, again, the building going in, the proposed building will be a metal sided building. Minus thermobaric weapons or a volcano. I'm not sure how you set that on fire. The existing building or a wood stick built construction is obviously more flammable. And even we talked about the requirements of a rated firewall installation. Well, a metal building that doesn't burn, that would require a rated, a 1 hour rated wall, would actually increase the flammability versus the metal building itself. So in terms of flammability, this is definitely a much safer building. Other concerns that were raised by him are the concerns about collapse, especially if you're elevating something in height. However, the style of construction, as we discussed earlier, as a pole barn, will have significant footings sunk into the foundation. So the risk of collapse there is absolutely minimal. Those are 2 points I wanted to bring in. But again, should this be preliminarily approved, all final plans and drawings will be looked at by Chief Blair. Considerations will be addressed, and hopefully I can bring some new information to you regarding that.
Thank you, Will. Is there anyone else who would like to speak or ask a question? Greg Worth, yes, please.
Mr. Worth, you're currently muted. There you go.
There we go, I'm unmuted. A lot of my concerns have been addressed, but is this my time to talk? Because I asked for some time to talk. Is this what this is?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm going to be brief. You know, I provided 2 letters dated August 16th, 2022 and September 11th, 2022 to Mr. Will Blodgett with questions about proposed project at 121 3rd Street. I thought we were going for final approval tonight, so most of my questions are directed at, you know, what I saw missing for final approval, because I went through this process recently, and you know, there were a lot of things missing for final approval. So, you know, what I'd ask to do is have these 2 letters included in the packet so that everybody can see and respond to my concerns. And then, you know, as we go through the final process, you know, if they're addressed in there, then I'm happy with it as well. I'm not opposed to, you know, construction, building. I did it myself, but I want to see it done properly. And I guess I'd like to make just one other point, because this keeps coming up. And, you know, you'll see this in my letter. And I think you addressed it early on, Will, when you said this was not intended to indicate that this had been approved before. It was just an indicator that we've gone through this process before. Because when I looked through the records, this had gone to P&Z a couple times and been rejected. I can give you the dates, and I actually included in my letter. It had gone to the Jerome design review. They had rejected the proposal. It was then appealed to the city council. They issued a preliminary, I can read it to you, but they basically gave a conditional approval based on meeting several conditions. Those conditions were never met, and a letter was sent on 3/28/19. A letter was sent indicating that those had expired. So when we say that this was previously approved, this was never previously approved. This was gone through the process. It was turned down many times by many of the boards. It was given a preliminary approval and then expired. So, you know, I just want to make that clear. But otherwise, you know, my comments are basically, I've got my letters indicating what my concerns were. And if you walk through those, I think, you know, it's identified clearly there. So any questions?
No, thank you so much for being here and participating. Ms. Foy, I believe you have a
Hi.
comment.
Oh, maybe after public.
I'll wait. I want to clarify, but I'll wait.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Worth? Anybody else have additional questions for the applicant, Ms. Foy, or our administrator? Anybody have any commentary? I think I'm going to say one more thing, and I think everyone seems to be interested in this structure being improved. I feel like we're all on the same page in that regard, and that we're all on the same page that we want it to be done right. I'm sure everyone's interested in that. And so, you know, as I said early on, you know, I understand the aspect of in order to maintain that historic footprint, it has to stay within the historic footprint, which means the existing non-conforming status would have to be preserved. So that I kind of wrap my head around that. I'm interested to see what happens on the height when we look at that in relation to the actual the correct parameters. So I would think that in the event we're in a position to approve, that we do definitely need some conditions in there that need to be met, I would definitely appreciate any additional feedback and or any proposed motions from the board members. Ms. Foy, I believe, has something else to say.
There's no public.
Thank you. So are we done with the public questions? I just wanted to wait and give everybody an opportunity before I clarify. You're on mute, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't see anybody else raising their hands.
Okay. To address Greg's concerns, there was a denial by P and Z, and then there was also an approval. There was actually a letter, 2 letters sent to me that were conflicting. One day I got one letter from council that said it was approved, and then I got another letter that said it on the same, it was dated the same day that said I was not approved. So it's the same, it was conflicting. There's a lot of conflicting things here, and I know that's passed, but I don't want it to be unclear that there was approval. It was a preliminary approval, but there was approval. And so I agree. I'm excited to hear that we care about the structure and being a good structure. And that is exactly what our goal is. I just want to clarify that it had been preliminary approved through an appeal process.
And I think regardless of the history, we're here today on a new application. So
Thank you.
That's where we're at. I would love
Thank you.
anybody.
I have a question for
Yes,
Will.
Sarah.
Yes, ma'am.
Is about the not having the building's roof be the same and what's making it change the historic of having a peak. I'm just curious about that.
Forgive
Because-
me, I'm kind of confused by that.
The roof, the way it
Yes.
stands now, and what is saying, what's the template of going to the historic and then putting a peak? And I guess my understanding of like doing remodeling to historic would be to keep it the same, but making it improved. So I'm confused.
Well, we are trying to keep the historic footprint, and also to rebuild something exactly the way as it was historically is actually frowned upon. We don't want to do that. We don't want to make facsimiles of history, but yet we want to keep a historic aesthetic. So the historic exterior is to keep the community aesthetic of its history intact, instead of having a whole bunch of new looking buildings, even if they are new, interspaced randomly in amongst the old historic buildings that are well taken care of. This ensures that even a new constructed building can maintain that historic aesthetic for the neighborhood.
And the guidelines of that it needs to be similar to the historic
Yes.
material. Yes.
And for these purposes, Jerome had a lot of metal sided buildings. That is totally in line with the historic nature of this town.
Yeah.
I'd like to recognize Lori Riley, please.
I do have a question because I noticed in these things, this is going to be a 2-story building at 14 feet maximum. Each level is not very tall. And so I don't see an elevation thing about like how tall the garage part is versus the upper studio area. Because 14 feet is the maximum they can go, and it's pretty restrictive.
Now, any of the final building construction designs, plans that we get will have these details in them. And because this is done by a large contracting company, this stuff is going to be up to code, inspected by Barry or building inspector. And so all these concerns will be addressed. And if something is too short or out of spec in whatever way, it simply won't be approved, and then changes will be made, hopefully to accommodate what changes need to be done. And then hopefully, the applicant can find a way to mitigate the concern. Like, there's the process itself should take care of these problems as it rolls, as long as the process works. That's what part of the final site plan review and our building inspector are for, to ensure some of those things.
Okay. So I have a
Kara?
question.
Yes.
So we're just kind of the preliminary of like a discussion? Because now you have to
Yes.
go talk about the height and then about if the wall is the age it is and all that, or?
Yes, this is a conceptual approval, and a final approval might be dependent based on conditions being met, such as verifying the, the accuracy of the historic foundation, which I will do.
But
I'm sorry, yes?
but not tonight because you
Oh, yeah,
still have,
no, it would not be
Okay.
possible tonight, no.
all right. Okay, so we're just talking.
Yes,
So-
I recognize Lance Shaw, please.
On the height, if you look at page 11 on your packet, there's an elevation that shows the garage doors. And like Will was pointing out about the height calculation, the 14 feet on the current elevation is measured from a point you can see on that page 11 where there's the elevation that shows 2 garage doors. The 14 feet is measured from a point due to the grade, slightly above the top of the garage doors. And that's the dimension that's kind of at question. If we recalculate what the grade is, that may change a foot or two. Which I don't know how it's going to work for the plans. What plans might be necessary to change. But just that's where the height comes from.
Just to give everyone another quick heads up. So we have circled around the clock again, and this incarnation of the meeting will time out to 4 minutes and 12 seconds. So aren't we all having a blast?
It's like there's a little boxing match. We're gonna go to the corners now.
It's consider it an intermission. Time to go grab another cold beverage and use the restroom.
Hey,
So yes, thank you, Lance. Thank you.
I do have one quick question. Okay, does this project also go through a design review
Yes,
board as well? So there will be additional,
yes,
not just construction review, but design review, and that will come
absolutely.
as it progresses and as we get more details and such.
and then it goes to the council?
It depending on a number of factors.
Oh,
There could be a number of potential outcomes. I humbly request that we focus on tonight's outcome.
okay. And are there any questions from the public? Have they spoke, everybody?
Is there anyone else that wanted to speak from the public? I know we heard from Greg Worth. Was there someone else that wanted to speak?
We had one petition to speak from Mandy Worth, but I don't see her in here currently. So
Well,
yes, sir.
I can answer that. Mandy is declining to speak.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
No, it was answered, her questions were answered in the process.
Perfect.
I'd like to make one more comment. I'd just like to know when, since I flew in for this meeting, I would like to know when you expect to have the information ready for a final review. And, when that will be posted, because I think we're heading towards saying there's going to be a final review some point. So I'd just like to know when it is, as soon as possible.
Well, unfortunately, I won't be able to give you a date, at least for a little while, because that final review process on my end, my process doesn't begin until I receive those final construction plans from the applicant. So a preliminary approval will start the ball rolling with the applicant, getting that information from the contractor. Then I will get it, review it. Once I receive that information, then I will be able to establish a timeline, but I'll make sure that you're notified and that everyone is notified in as timely a fashion as is humanly possible.
Can I ask one more?
Yes, please.
What does preliminary review mean? Because I went through and we went straight to approval. So what does a preliminary approval mean?
What this means is a conceptual approval. And for the sake of your process, what happened is likely the preliminary process was handled in-house by the zoning administrator and the building inspector at that time. Your information you probably submitted was complete, and they felt it wasn't necessary for review at that time. And so they probably conducted the preliminary in-house and then sent it directly for final review, which is permissible by the zoning ordinance. However, so is also sending the preliminary review into a public meeting format such as we've done here. And part of that has been to, I'm always an advocate for public discourse. I want to get comments. I want to get feedbacks. I want to know how people feel and think about this stuff. So I prefer more public involvement.
Just a comment there. We didn't go in without reviews. We had gone through planning and zoning, design review and everything else before we went for final approval.
Yeah, but I mean, if you did not go to a public meeting for preliminary, that implies that the zoning administrator and the building inspector conducted that in-house themselves and then. Okay, I apologize I got cut off there, Greg. Give us just a few minutes. Make sure everyone gets back here. Here we go. Well, now we can tell everyone we had 3 meetings in one night.
Sorry for the delay.
Okay, and again, this is something I want to resolve before we have another meeting on Zoom. And on behalf of the town, I do apologize to everyone present tonight. Thank you for your patience and understanding. So I believe I was cut off here. Would you mind prompting me again as to the question to make sure or unless I've already answered it sufficiently?
So that was me you're talking to?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I was just asking, 2 questions, I guess. When is this, this next final meeting happening, and what is the instruction to the applicant? Are we just saying, come back with a complete package? Is that what the board's doing? I just don't understand what a preliminary approval means.
It's a conceptual approval again, and that concept, it's saying that this project looks good, but we have some more information that we need to see. And in certain situations, certain projects, it makes sense to divide this up so that the applicant has time to acquire information that's either asked for or either acquire information that they have to pay for.
So at the
Yes,
next
Lance.
step, so at the next step, what we'll have is the full packet, like I filled in, with the checklists and all the information.
The next step will be a final review packet.
Okay.
Yeah,
Lance, do you have something pertinent here?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Greg, typically what we do a preliminary review for is to get the rough outline of the project defined before an applicant spends a lot of money on an architect to build a house and, do all the drawings, all the construction details and so on. In a project like yours, most of the footprint of the house is there, and you know how high it is, and you know where it sits in a lot and things like that. So you can, like Will pointed out, move directly to a final review because you can have, it's more easy for you to come up with final plans.
Okay, yeah, because
But in a situation like this where there's a new structure or a rebuilt structure, replacement structure, the applicant may want to get a handle on the general outline of the plan is approved before they hire an architect and do all the details.
Okay, so I took a little bit of risk because I spent about 15 grand getting to that first meeting. So
Yes, sir.
There you go.
okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, are there any more questions or comments from either the board members or any other attendees? I would like to make a motion that we give a preliminary approval on this application with the conditions that the height of the structure be recalculated based on the correct parameters. And that we verify the historic footprint of the structure.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
We
Aye.
Hey,
All opposed, please say nay.
Nay. And my reasoning is that until everything is brought forth, it might change it completely if the wall is a different age or if it's not historic. There's so much to say that approving it doesn't make any sense.
We can't get to that stage unless we get past this one, though. That's just, I think we have the vote, though. Did we get everybody registered there? It seemed like there was some crosstalk over the voting, so.
Well, no, I don't understand voting and approving if we don't know about the height and we don't know about if the wall is historic. So that changes everything. If it's not historic, it's a new build, and then the setbacks are different and everything. So I'm voting no. That's why
Okay,
I'm voting no.
you're entitled to your vote.
Yes.
Did anyone abstain?
Did anyone abstain? Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
You got what you needed, Kristen. Okay. All right, so we're gonna move on now. We've got item number 5, updates of recent and upcoming meetings. And I'll turn this back to Will to give us our update.
all right. On Tuesday, August 9th, at the regular council meeting, they approved resolution number 644 regarding tax valuation of property within the town and approved an agreement for professional engineering services for the wastewater treatment plant. They approved renting a town property to a town employee and approved 2 special event permits, one for the Art in the Park and the other for the Jerome Indie Film and Music Festival. Council approved a conditional use permit for continued residential use at 511 School Street. Tuesday, August 23rd, council special meeting approved resolution 645, declaring and adopting the results of the primary election and appointed Sonia Sheffield to fill the council vacancy and administered the oath of office to her. The Tuesday, August 23rd DRB regular meeting was canceled for no items. And the Tuesday, August 30th P&Z special meeting was postponed until tonight. We have nothing currently planned for the upcoming October 18th P&Z meeting, but that is always subject to change.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, if there's nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn from anybody?
I'm
I
making,
make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I second it.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, that motion passes. We are adjourned, folks.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone, for your
everybody.
patience while we have technical issues yet again. And you guys have a wonderful night.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.